right, in this video, we're going to make a small application using JavaFX, but we're going to look at using some labels and text boxes and buttons just to see some example code. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to create a new project, a JavaFX project, and I'll call it text demo. Remember, it's JDK 1.8 or it won't work. All right, so here is our basic Hello World app that it always starts us with. Let's clean up a little bit of stuff here. I am going to take off. Yeah, I think I'll take off everything down to here. I'll leave the scene so we don't have to retype that. I'm going to change the size of it to 350 and 100 because I've already experimented with this before. And I'm going to set the title so it just kind of gives some names, some instructions. Type your name, push copy. So this is just going to be a little app that the user is going to type their name in a box. They're going to push a button and it's going to type, copy the contents of the box into a label. That's it. Nothing fancy. But let's go through the process of what we need to do for a JavaFX application to do that. And we'll learn a few things about click events with lambda expressions. We'll also learn how to use text boxes and labels. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the things that I need for my form. And I've kind of planned this out. So I'm going to create a label. And I'm going to call it LBL label 1. So I have to do a new label. And when you create a label, you can specify its contents right on the fly. So I'm going to have it say name colon with a space after it. So this is going to be a label that sits in front of a text box. It tells the user what to type into a text box. Now, notice doesn't know what it is. We have to import. Maybe make sure we're importing JavaFX and not Java AWT. All right, so we're going to have a label. We're going to have a text field, a place for the user to type text. So text field is the class. We're going to call it text name. Actually, I'm going to use txt. It's going to be a new text field. And again, we have to import it. There we go. And I spelled that wrong. There we go. So we have a label. We have a text field. Let's make a button. So I'm going to call this btn copy because it's going to copy the thing from one place to the other. So that's going to be a new button. Okay, so we have to separate words. And while we're doing the new button, we'll say button copy. Set text. And we'll set its text to the word copy. Okay, so we're just going through creating all these controls that we're going to need on our form. We're not putting them on the form. We're not doing anything. We're just creating them in memory. And then we need one more label. And I'm going to call it LBL output because this is where I'm going to output some things. So that's a new label. I think I've got all the controls made that I want on my form. So now I need to think about the form and how I want it to be laid out. So I am going to create a group. We talked about groups. They let us put things however we want. So So I'm going to do that because I think it's pretty flexible. There's actually probably some better ways to do this one that will make a neater layout. That's the kind of thing you can play with. So I'm just going to do a new group. Okay, so that's a node. Remember, that's a node where we can put other nodes inside of it, or we can put, and we're going to import that as well. I'm going to use a couple H boxes. Actually, I'm going to use 3. H box. I'm going to call the first one row 1. And obviously we have to import HBox as well. And I'm going to do 3 rows and call each of them row 1, then row 2, then row 3. So they're kind of for layout. All right, so now I am going to take these things that I made and add them each to a different row. And then I'm going to take those rows and add them and position them in my group. Okay, so that's the process we're going through. I made the controls. I'm going to add the controls to an HBox for layout. And I'm going to add the HBox to a group as the root node. All right, so let's do that. Row 1, let's get its children. And then we'll add all. I like add all. Oops, excuse me. And what are we going to add to that? We're going to add label 1. We're going to add text name and button copy. Oop, that's txt name. All right, so I want to test this as I go. So I'm going to come down here a little ways, give myself some room. I'm going to go ahead and add my row to my root. So root.getChildren. .add, and I am going to add row 1 to that. So I think I have what I need here. So I have my row added to my root's added to my scene, and my scene's added to my stage. Okay, a lot of steps in JavaFX. It may seem like a lot to have to make a root, add scenes, add stages, but ultimately that does make it more flexible because we can have a whole bunch of separate scenes in an application. We're not doing anything that complicated in this, but if you have a bunch of scenes, you can swap them in and out really fast. Let's test this and see what it looks like. Oh, it's lost my default application. I probably deleted something by accident. I'm not going to take the time to troubleshoot that right now. I'm just going to right click on my file. And I'm just going to run the file directly because I'll figure out what's going on with my default later. So there it is. Remember I added row 1. I had that label, the text box, and the button. I probably should tweak that label a little bit, but for time purposes, I'm not going to. It looks a little high and it doesn't look lined up with the box very well. But we'll go with that. That's our row 1. All right, so let's handle row 2 now. Row 2, get children. And we'll add just button copy to this row. Right, down here for the root, I'm going to change this to add all. So I can add row 1 and then row 2. I run the file. Oh, my copy button went right on top of my label up here. So I probably need to move that down. So let me do that. Let me do it after the scene's created. Row 2 dot set layout X. Actually, what we want to do Y. Set it down 30 pixels down. Let's run that now again. Yeah, that moved my button down underneath. So here's my row 1. There's my row 2. Now let's do row 3. I'm going to get children again. Then I'm going to do an add. And we'll just do the label for the output. Semicolon at the end, and then we have to add row 3 to the root box as well. There we go. And we can't really see it because we didn't put anything in that label. If we want to, when we create the new label here, we could put a word. Let's just put the word test in it. Oh, I'm not seeing it. Oh, yeah, it's there. I didn't move it down. So it's just coming up and it's overwriting name up here. So that wasn't good. So let me do row 3. Let's set its Y position. And that should take care of it. It was working just fine. There it is. So I put the word test in there so that we can see it. And it's working. So I have row 1, row 2, and row 3 all set up. So I've kind of built a form here, a simple form. Nothing fancy. Matter of fact, I'd probably spend a lot more time tweaking the layout. But I'm not going to. Not for this. So I'm going to take the words out of there. Now, what do we want to happen? When somebody types their name in the box and pushes the button, we want to copy it to the other label. So we're really learning how to manipulate these text boxes and these labels. So let's create an event for our button, which is called button copy. So we're at button copy, and we will set on action. So that's a little bit different than what we did with Duke in the last video. So the standard action for a button is a click event. So this is kind of setting the click event for a button. And in here, we're going to put, we'll just use event for the, excuse me. I want to type this so it's a little bit easier to understand. And this is going to be a lambda expression. I'm still missing a parenthesis here. So on the event, we want to do the following code. And we will actually make a code block, even though I probably don't need it on this one. I'm going to put a code block. I'm going to put curly braces. There we go. I'm going to put the curly braces in case you want to do an extra line. I always tell people, if you're a new programmer, you can use a block because you might add a line later and it could screw things up if you forget it. So use the block whether you need it or not. I always use the curly braces. All right, so what's going to happen when this event happens? We're using this lambda expression here. When the event happens, I want you to do the code that's in here. And what we're going to do is take the output label, and it has a method called setText. And we can specify something to set its text to. What are we going to do with that? I'm going to set the text so that it says hello, comma, space, and then I'm going to concatenate on the contents of the box they typed their name into. So that was called text name, and we are going to use its getText method to pull the name out of this text box, concatenate it on with the word hello, and then set the text of this label. So this is a little click event that does the code that we want to happen when somebody presses button copy. Let's go. Let's make sure I save it. And I will run the file. And here it is. I'm going to type George for the name, and I'm going to hit copy, and it says hello, comma, George. So we did a little bit of layout. We learned about how to access properties of a text box. We learned how to access properties of a label. And we learned how to use some H boxes inside a group. And we can play with that. You should play with it. Make your application look good.